All right, so for sake of time, we'll get started. I know there may be a few joining later, but we'll kick things off so that we make sure we have enough time to get through everything today. We really appreciate everyone joining. Nice to meet you all, and thank you for jumping on our webinar today to boost profitability amidst inflation this summer with the 15 group and David Hopkins. A few housekeeping comments is just that we do have the Q&A going on the bottom panel here. So please feel free to list all of your questions there, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end once we've got through the content. And this webinar is also recording, so we'll make sure to send an email out to everyone after so you have the recording and you can rewatch or share with anyone on your team that might be interested in listening who may not have been able to attend today. So just to kick things off, I'm going to introduce you to our presenter, David Hopkins, who's the president of the 15 group. So David's had over 30 years of experience in the restaurant industry. And he spent his career in the industry with a focus on restaurant operations. He's held various senior management positions with some of the top restaurant companies in North America. In 1997, David joined Sir Corp to head up the financial accounting department of one of the most profitable divisions. And during his time there, David reconstructed the division's information processing into a centralized accounting department and helped the division grow from 4 restaurants to 9, each with sales over $4 million annually. In 2001, David formed the 15 Group, which is a consulting company dedicated to maximizing the restaurant and hospitality profitability. The 15 Group's clients range from owner-operated establishments to multi-unit restaurant corporations worldwide. Since 2001, David has continually grown and developed the company and its offerings, reaching a milestone of over 1,000 clients. So David, I'll pass it over to you in a moment here. I was just going to say Push Operations, I'm sure most of you are aware, but we're an all-in-one labor management solution. We've been around since 2012, and we service restaurants all over North America. We started as a payroll company, and since then we've built our solutions to encompass scheduling, clocks, candidate onboarding, and reporting. Whether an individual location or an enterprise multi-unit chain, we have a platform to help take away manual processes and make the lives of employees and restaurateurs easier and more efficient. So we really appreciate you joining. And with that, I'll kick it off to David to start the presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If anyone can't hear me, then let me know. But yeah, thank you. It's great to be back with Push again. We love Push. We've done work with Push for quite a while now. We've done webinars, we do other things. So thrilled to be here. We're always happy to join in and share what we can, or at least our thoughts and insights into restaurant success and restaurant operation. So as Kelsey mentioned, 15 Group, we were founded more than 20 years ago. We have worked with over 1,000 food and beverage operations now. Offices in Toronto and Vancouver, but we work across North America and actually internationally. We have a couple of projects outside of North America now. And we have a team of roughly 40, and we do 2 main things at the 15 Group. We make we make existing restaurants way more profitable. That's why I started the company when I did. We do that all day long. But then probably about 14, 15 years ago, we started getting into concept creation and developing and creating exciting new restaurant concepts. And that's actually grown to probably 50% of our work, working with hotels, wineries, golf courses, and a lot of individuals to create new exciting restaurant concepts. So we're going to kick off. I'm going to chat about inflation. Biggest buzzword of the next 6 months. You know, during COVID, it was all about pivot, and now it's all about inflation. And that was in the title of what we're talking about today, because it is such an important thing. And it's important because a lot of people are afraid of inflation. Personally, my approach, and I've done a bunch of interviews with media outlets and what have you, I'm thrilled about inflation and what it can do for the restaurant industry. But we need to approach it properly, which unfortunately a lot of restaurants really aren't doing. So why I'm thrilled about inflation is because it's nothing new to us. If you've been in the restaurant industry as long as I have, and I'm dating myself with my lack of hair and what have you, but if you've been in the industry as long as I have, we've been dealing with inflation more than the general consumer or the general marketplace for years. So this whole new inflation thing of 2023, this isn't new. If you look at the minimum wage chart in Ontario as an example versus inflation, if we went by inflation from year 2000 to 2020, the minimum wage would only be $9.84 in 2020, but it was actually $14.25. It's now, I think it's $15.50 now. I think it's going up to $16.25 or something in a few months. So we've been dealing with wage inflation for years and years. And as you know, the restaurant industry is highly driven by minimum wage. Even your managers, your senior team members, your senior cooks, all of their wages are driven by minimum wage. And if you look at a sampling of some product pricing from 2000 to 2020, again, highly outpacing inflation, or what everybody else's inflation was for 20 years. You've got meat prices, basically doubling over the last 20 years. You've got potatoes in this example, tripling. So we've been dealing with this for years as a restaurateur. What's different now is that the entire consumer marketplace is now part of the discussion, which is, in my mind, awesome. Because for the last 20 years, we've been dealing with it, but haven't been able to do anything about it. Now we're dealing with it just like we always have, but everyone else is part of the discussion, which is fantastic. So how can we boost profitability in this new environment? And like I said, from my perspective, this is a golden opportunity if restaurants don't mess it up. And unfortunately, a lot of restaurants are messing it up right now. And I'm pretty passionate about it because I constantly go to restaurants now and I see them doing the wrong things given this opportunity we have. And the industry actually is starting to get a bad name because of this, because so many restaurants are approaching it the wrong way. So I'm going to talk about 4 different opportunities that we have right now to really kind of capitalize on, and how we're working with our clients to approach them and capitalize. So first is pricing. Prices have to go up. We're in inflationary, we've always been inflationary, but we need to deal with the inflationary pressures and make money. So prices need to go up. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about guest experience as well, because this is an incredibly critical part that goes, well, it's an incredibly important part of hospitality in general, but it goes hand in hand with pricing. We're going to talk about service periods, because given the labor market and where things are going right now with labor and staffing challenges that still seem to exist, it's an important discussion. And we're going to talk about technology, because technology is about as big a buzzword as inflation right now in the restaurant industry. So let's start off with prices. So we did a survey not long ago, and we found that 70% of our respondents, and this was a survey not to restaurateurs, but just to consumers, and we found that 70% of respondents said they would support a price increase in restaurants. This is massive, because as long as I can remember, you would never hear 70% of people supporting a restaurant price increase. But because, again, everyone is part of the inflation discussion right now, everybody's aware of what restaurants went through during COVID, people are supportive of a price increase. So this is fantastic. In 2017, if you ask consumers this, we didn't do a study back then, unfortunately, but I bet it would have been 15 or 20% max. When I've done these webinars in the past, if you've been to any of my webinars, I always introduce David's Bistro, which is my little restaurant. It's fictitious and delicious, but it's a nice little 80 to 100 seater, nice little bistro. It does about 2 million a year in sales. And we introduce it to illustrate some of the things that I'm discussing. So David's Bistro pre-inflation was doing 2 million in sales. It was doing well. We were running a tight ship. It was good. We were making about $240,000 in profit. Now we're dealing with this inflationary pressure. We're seeing a 20% increase in product costs, 20% increase in labor costs, and a 10% average increase in our operational costs. So now David's Bistro, that a couple of years ago or what have you was making $240,000 a year, maybe pre-COVID, it's now losing $32,000 a year. So if we at David's Bistro put our prices up 15%, which is a very reasonable price increase, given where things are today and where some increases are going, we don't have any other costs associated with that price increase other than, well, potentially percentage rent if you're on a percentage rent deal. But more realistically, the only fees you have with a price increase are credit card commissions. So we have a little bit of a hit to our operating costs, but apart from that, everything goes straight to bottom line when we do a price increase. So a 15% price increase gets David's Bistro back up and actually a bit above the profitability levels that we had, whatever, 2 years ago, pre-COVID, whatever you want to say. So that's fantastic. So we have the opportunity to raise prices, but the important thing and what so many restaurants are doing poorly is we've got to raise prices wisely. And we see so many restaurants in the marketplace that are just going, oh my gosh, my product costs have gone up 40%, my labor's gone up 20%, I got to put my prices up 40%. And it's killing the industry and it's killing their profitability. So by raise prices wisely, if you've ever heard any of my webinars, I harp on margin menu pricing. So this is where we focus on the margin contribution of item profitability as opposed to percent cost, which hospitality schools still teach percent cost. Some of them do, some of them don't, because we have convinced them not to. It's still what we're taught growing up in the industry. I mean, when I worked 25, 30 years ago in the industry, it was all percent cost pricing, and it's wrong. It's plain out wrong. And so margin menu pricing is the proper approach, and it's incredibly important when you're dealing with inflation and increasing your pricing because of it. So here's what we're seeing in many typical restaurants. I was at one in my neighborhood with my wife last week, I think, and we're seeing exactly this. We're seeing a steak dinner pre-COVID or pre-inflation, whatever you want to call it, a year, 2 years ago, 4 years ago. It cost $16.80, and the restaurant was selling it for $49.50. And they were making it was a 34% food cost. And now the suppliers come along and said, oh my gosh, steak prices have gone up. We've got to add $6 to your cost of product. So what so many restaurants are doing now is they're doing the food cost percent approach. And they're saying, okay, well, I got to maintain a 34% food cost on that dish. So I need to now charge $67. And the restaurant my wife and I went to, all of their prices are outrageous. The restaurant used to be busy as sin, and we were in there on a Thursday night, and it was not even close to as busy as it used to be. And it's because people like me aren't happy paying $67 for the thing that a year and a half or 2 years ago I paid $49 for. And the restaurant is pricing themselves out of the market. And if you've heard people talk about the industry is pricing themselves out of the marketplace as well. And we're squandering this great opportunity. So the talk around the industry is, I can't afford to eat at restaurants anymore. They're too expensive. And this whole approach of this $67 price point is completely wrong because it's focused on that percent cost. What this restaurant should be doing is saying, okay, I was a 34% food cost, but I actually made $32.70 off this steak. My suppliers told me the price of the steak is going up by $6. Okay. I now need to put my price at $55 to make the same profit that I used to off the steak. So my increase doesn't need to go up to $69. My increase needs to go up to $55, a small increase from what I used to be priced at. And for a consumer like me, I'm 100% okay with that all day long. I'm not okay with the $69 increase, which is just massive. And so the reality is that I only need to put up my prices by 12, 13, 14% to match a product cost increase of 35 or whatever percent. And this approach is the way a restaurant wins at dealing with inflationary price pressures. And like I said, it's hugely concerning for me. And we see individual restaurants that are completely squandering their business because at the end of the day, if you've heard my webinars, revenue is the most important thing. We need guests coming in. We need to drive guest value. And we see all these restaurants going, oh my God, inflation, and putting their prices up exorbitantly. And they're losing customers, they're losing guest traffic. And then, like I said, for the industry, it's crushing the industry because people have this perception now that restaurants are too expensive, I can't go and eat out. There was one restaurant, I can't remember the name, but I probably wouldn't say the name anyway. But I think it was in Calgary, and they were selling burgers. It was a nice higher end bistro burger place. And they were selling burgers at about $20, $22 a burger. And now they, or not now, they may be closed now, I'm not sure, but they doubled all their pricing. And they said, well, oh my gosh, with inflation, we got to put our prices up to $44 a burger or something. And it's crazy. They don't need to do that. And they're losing that guest value proposition. So anyway, so pricing, you got to put your prices up. We're dealing with inflation. We have been given the right by the consumer to now put pricing up, which is unheard of in my history in restaurants. We've been given their approval to put pricing up, but we've got to be smart about it. We've got to do it wisely. And if we do it wisely, we can crush it. So the next thing I want to talk about is guest experience, which goes hand in hand with pricing. It's the most important piece of revenue driving in restaurants. We can never not talk about guest experience. So one of the things that we find that's happening now because of what's happening with minimum wage, with inflation, with the shortage of labor markets, a shortage of labor in the market, is obviously labor costs are going up. And this inflationary pressure we're seeing is now this massive labor number that we're not used to. And what restaurants are tending to do is they're trying to say, oh my gosh, my labor costs are going up. I need to squeeze that labor cost. Which I will never say you don't need to diligently control labor costs. But a lot of restaurants are going overboard and trying to really squeeze the labor costs because they're not used to this increase that they're experiencing. And even when you add that 15% price increase, the 32% pre-inflation or pre-COVID labor cost has now jumped to 33%, and they're like, ooh, we got to squeeze it back down to 32. Controlling labor costs, incredibly important. This is why we love Push, because it's such a great tool to help you do that. But we've got to be really conscious that we can't compromise guest experience. We can't squeeze labor to the point of squeezing guest experience. So if you've seen some of my previous webinars, a restaurant and driving revenue and being successful at driving revenue is all about creating a value proposition for the guest. And a value proposition, it's the difference between the level of experience you're delivering and how much they're paying for it. So if and obviously the more you increase the experience or you decrease the price point, the bigger the value proposition comes. And that's what drives word of mouth. That's what drives repeat traffic. So if we're now saying, you know what, we have to increase prices, the last thing we want to do is decrease the experience. We've got to make sure we at least maintain guest experience. But in a perfect world, we even go, to quote and date my age, to quote Spinal Tap, we've got to go from 10 to 11. We've got to deliver even more guest experience to maintain a value proposition. So the important thing when you're looking at labor is that you don't try and squeeze that because of these inflationary pressures and diminish experience. Because again, if you diminish experience, you're dead in the water. And if you diminish it and you put your prices up, which you pretty much need to, you're really dead in the water. So you got to be wary of labor costs, but not to the detriment of guest experience. So this number, don't be afraid of it. It is going to be bigger than it used to be, but utilize that and springboard off that to elevate your guest experience. We've got a whole separate webinar that talks about the value proposition and guest experience and all that. The one thing I would say is, and you guys know this, if you've gone to a restaurant, within reason, if you get an 11 out of 10 completely kick-ass experience that knocks your socks off, you are fine paying more money. Now, within reason, you're not fine paying crazy amounts of money, but you're fine paying more money if you're wowed by the experience. And that's what's critical here, is make sure you're driving that experience so that your price increases are more than acceptable. Now, I can't talk about labor and the labor market and what's going on there without talking about tipping, because tipping is something that is a huge opportunity right now that restaurateurs don't realize, or they're not utilizing to their advantage to drive guest experience. So tipping in restaurants, this is losing my voice. This is a study. I'll let you read that while I take some water here. So tipping has grown. People are tipping more. Tipping, it's a hot topic. It's gotten out of control in some places. My wife went to a convenience store the other day and bought, I don't know, Advil or something, and they actually prompted her for a tip at the end, and we were like, anyway, hot topic, but whatever hot topic it is, it's indisputable that people are tipping more now than they did 2, 3, 4 years ago. So for David's Bistro, there are two things going on that's important when we're talking about labor and guest experience. One is consumers are tipping a higher percent than they were before, right? This is a fact. Studies have shown it. There's higher tip percent coming in. But the second thing is David's Bistro, we just raised our prices about 15% to deal with inflation, and people are now tipping on that new price, which is higher than it was before. So for David's Bistro, the average amount that people are tipping that is higher than before is resulting in $60,000 and more tips coming into not the restaurant, but the staff, right? They're the ones who are being tipped. And because we put our prices up, that 15% price increase actually means there's $54,000 more in tip money coming into David's Bistro. So David's Bistro now has around $114,000 more tip money flowing into our, what I would call, restaurant ecosystem. Now, like I said, it is server tip money. They are the ones who are being tipped. But this is $114,000 more money for the same staff, the same labor profile, the same everything. And to me, that's a huge opportunity. So we've been working with our clients on how do we make this a more fair and balanced system to reward our staff and help us engage in a better guest experience and help us with those labor cost pressures. And that can be a variety of things. That could be a higher staff tip out that then gets distributed to help compensate back of house. It could be utilizing that labor pool and that tip out to do certain things that improve the guest experience. But at the end of the day, there is more money, even though, you know, we're dealing with labor inflationary pressures and higher wages. There is a lot more money in our ecosystem that we have the ability to manipulate. And as you know, owners can't take part of that tip, but we certainly can use it and redistribute it and align it so that we're better delivering to our labor force and helping create a better guest experience. All right, let's move on to service periods. And this is kind of, this is an important thing that we're working with a lot of clients on. We've always been working on this stuff with our clients over the last 20 years. But we're working on it a lot more now because it's come more to the forefront with labor shortages and what have you. So what we're doing with clients is really focusing on the elimination of unprofitable revenue streams and the addition of profitable revenue streams. Now, this kind of probably seems, you know, as I say it there, I kind of think, well, that's obvious. But we go into restaurants constantly that aren't grasping this concept and or haven't evaluated it properly such that they can improve their profitability and move forward in the right direction. So again, if you've seen my other webinars, I always talk about revenue reigns supreme. Revenue is the single most important thing for a restaurant. Once you're up and open, the concept of incremental revenue is the biggest driver of profitability. And that's because if you can drive $200,000 more to your sales revenue, there are very few costs associated with that other than product cost, which let's say for David's Bistro is 32%, and labor cost, but not 30% labor cost, incremental labor cost. Because again, if I'm open for dinner and I get 4 tables more than I would have otherwise, I'm not changing any of my staff. I'm not hiring a new manager. Like my labor cost on getting 4 additional tables tonight for dinner is 0 because I'm not changing my staff profile. So when we find that the marginal labor cost for a typical restaurant is around 10%, depends on the restaurant, could be 12, 14%. But it's typically in and around 10% for that marginal incremental revenue. And then you got a bunch of other small expenses, credit card commissions, repairs and maintenance, paper, takeout supplies, but basically 50% of any incremental revenue goes to bottom line profit. So figuring out ways to drive more revenue is so important. And this is why we were a huge supporter and we were so involved in the Cafe TO program in Toronto. But all these programs where they allowed restaurants that typically don't have patios to now have patios is massive, because we're taking an operation that's already paying for a manager, a chef, kitchen staff, all those people, and we're layering on a bunch more seats in the summertime that those restaurants didn't have before. And that's just huge for a profitability boost. So we're so happy that most of the municipalities we know have kept those programs in place. And restaurants need to, seize those opportunities because they're huge profit increasers when done properly. What you need to be wary about, though, is meal periods. And we've worked with 4 clients in the last 4 months where we have analyzed their Monday to Friday lunch business and illustrated how much money they're losing by being open Monday to Friday lunch. So this is an example of one. They were doing $600 on Monday, $650 Tuesday, up to $1,000 on Friday. And the client was quite happy with their performance. It was pretty good. And when we isolate it and analyze it, incremental revenue is only valuable when you're already going to be open for business and you've already incurred all those sunk costs. But when you analyze a meal period on its own and the costs associated with that, you got to make sure it's profitable and worth the effort that you're putting into it. So for this restaurant, their weekly revenue was $3,750. They had a manager who would manage the Monday to Friday lunch meal period, and you should have a manager if you're going to deliver an 11 out of 10 guest experience. They'd have on average 2 front of house people depending on the day. They didn't have a manager in for the kitchen, but they did have 2 people in the back of house to execute the lunch. And the lunch would vary too, so they had to be prepped for it. Like some Mondays out of the blue, they do $1,200, but others they do $300. It was all over the map. And then, so you got your labor costs, then you got your operating costs, you got utility costs because you're open, you've got air conditioning in the summer. And what we found that for this restaurant, being open Monday to Friday lunches was actually costing them $45,000 a year in profitability. Meaning, quite literally, if they closed Monday to Friday lunch, instead of opening Monday to Friday lunch, they would be $45,000 richer every year. And, you could argue that, some of that back of house labor cost, they were actually doing prep for the evening. And you could argue, I could have 1 front of house person executing that instead of 2 front of house people. And if you argue that and we factor that in, I would argue that that's not really the case. If you're delivering an 11 out of 10 guest experience, which is of utmost importance, I would argue you need 2 front of house people. And if you argue that the 2 back of house people are doing prep work for the evening, we've done enough of this analysis to know that that's not really happening. If they're doing some prep for the evening, it's pretty marginal. But I guess the point is, even if I build some of those factors into this, the best I'm getting this scenario to is a break-even profit, meaning you're not losing $45,000 a year in profitability, but you're breaking even. And my argument would be that's a whole lot of effort to put into a meal period to just come out at break even and not actually help our business make money. I would way rather have you not do this, especially when labor is scarce and we're having trouble staffing all these meal periods. I would rather have you not do this and put 100% of your owner efforts, your GM efforts, whatever efforts it is. Let's put all of those efforts into, maybe it's Tuesday to Saturday night, where we can absolutely crush it. We can deliver an 11 out of 10 guest experience, and where we can actually improve our profitability as opposed to struggling along just to break even. So anyway, this is just an example, but it's interesting that in the last, like I said, 4 months, we've worked with 4 different restaurant clients where the amount that they're losing by being open for the Monday to Friday lunch meal period is massive. So analyzing where you really make money, where you lose money, and not bothering putting effort into that. And then how do we capture incremental revenue, which is a huge opportunity in the summer months, I think is critical to improving your profitability. And I have absolutely no idea why I put this slide in here, but you know what, we'll go back to the key amount that driving incremental revenue drives to the bottom line profitability. And I am not bad on time, which is fantastic. So the last item I want to talk about is technology. Hot topic, especially these days. You know, I went to the, I was involved heavily in the Restaurants Canada trade show back in April. I was not involved, but I went down to the Chicago National Trade Show in May. And I was just at the high tech conference recently. Man, when you go into the technology sections in these conferences, oh my gosh, it's massive. The amount of technology is massive. So I have a viewpoint on technology, and I really come back to the fundamentals of restaurant success. And we have seen this I have seen it for my 35 years in the industry, and nothing is different now than it was 35 years ago. In terms of how do we be successful in a restaurant? How do we make money? So that is 2 main things. One is you need exceptional value proposition, which all comes down to guest experience. We need to drive exceptional guest experience and provide a value proposition for our guests. And that is what drives revenue in any restaurant operation all day long. So that's the first thing. The second thing we need is fiscal responsibility within the operation. And you need fiscal responsibility across all your operation, but because of the nature of a restaurant business, it largely comes down to product cost control and labor cost control. So I am thrilled with technology. I'm thrilled with where technology is going, as long as it helps you with one of these 3 things. And there are a lot of great things out there that help you with one of these 3 things. There are things that definitely help with guest experience. We're seeing QR codes. Certainly in recent years, you now have tableside ordering that obviously 20 years ago, we didn't have tableside ordering. Anything that can help drive guest experience and make that a better value proposition for the guest is awesome. And on the fiscal responsibility side, there are all kinds of things that can help you now with product cost control and labor cost control. And we're thrilled if it can help you with that. We see a lot of technology things now in the marketplace that get you spinning your wheels, and they're cool ideas. And we've gone into so many restaurants where they're completely dropping the ball on these 3 things because they're spending all their time playing with technology pieces that don't do these 3 things. They do other things. So these 3 things are critical. I wanted to highlight, you know, we've been thrilled to work with Push over the years. We love Push. And we love Push because it does help you with effective labor control. And, you know, obviously this is a Push sponsored event, whatever you want to call it, but I'm not just saying that. We love Push because it helps you do labor cost control and plan your labor and make your whole HR piece work more effectively. Now, the other piece of the equation, we helped consult and we partnered with a company called Navi that actually is, I'm biased, but I think it's the most effective product cost control solution for restaurants. We launched it with Navi about a year ago. We think it's awesome. And the only reason I'm highlighting this now is because I do firmly believe these are two great technology pieces. But keep your ears out, because I know Kelsey and the team from Navi are working on something where pushing Navi down the road. We're working on some, hopefully, some new stuff, some new combo packages. Navi is integrated with Push. It's a great combo solution for that piece of the puzzle. So I wanted to highlight that. Obviously, this is a Push-sponsored webinar. We're all heavily involved with Navi, and it's a technology solution that I think really helps with those pieces that I talked about. So to sum up, and I'm right on time, which is not usual. Ask my wife. Anyway, to sum up, pricing, incredibly important. We need to increase prices, but man, you need to do it wisely, and restaurants not doing it wisely are killing the industry right now. So be smart about your price increases. If done properly, we're going to thrive. If we are gouging because we don't understand margin menu pricing, we're going to lose all our business and we'll be priced really high and have no customers. Guest experience, always important, but more important now than ever. Focus on the meal periods that matter and drive the guest experience in those meal periods where you can actually lift your profitability. Okay. And finally, technology, guest experience, product cost control, labor cost control. That's where your technology focus needs to be. Any way you can do those things better and easier is where you need to put your emphasis. The last thing I just wanted to touch on, the 15 group, we released a book. We launched a book about 4 weeks ago. It's called The Kitchen Sink. I'm biased. I wrote the book, so I'm obviously biased, but I honestly think it's an essential read for every restaurant owner, manager, and chef. Why do I think that? Because like I said, we've worked with 1,000 restaurants over the last 20 years, and all of those restaurants need to read The Kitchen Sink, because all of those restaurants would benefit hugely from what we've put in this book in terms of content. And because we love Push and we're doing this thing with Push, we've got a 40% off promo code that expires, I believe, at the end of August, but Push 40. If you go to the website, kitchensinkbook.com, this will be in the link that, or the email that goes out from the Push team after, but you get 40% off the book, and I would highly recommend you get it for yourself if you're an owner. If you've got a team, get it for your entire team. They need to read this. Again, I'm biased, but I think it's an essential read. So go to the website, check it out. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Kelsey with any questions that we've had come in. Thank you very much, everyone. Thrilled to have been part of this once again. We love doing these webinars with Push, and hopefully you guys find them beneficial.
Thanks, David. We definitely got a few questions. I'll just read them off one by one here. First one, are certain models of restaurants more resilient to inflation than others?
Yeah, great question. Yes, well, absolutely. Full service, table serve restaurants have the ability to deal with inflation much easier. And that's just because of truly a table service environment's ability to really elevate guest experience. And I could talk about guest experience in table service restaurants all day long. We find that 80 to 85% of restaurants aren't operating at the level they could be, which means there's a huge opportunity to elevate that guest experience. Quick serve, it's harder because there is more sensitivity to price increases. So I guess, yeah, at the end of the day, quick serve are tougher. For me, if David's Bistro, I can put my prices up 15, 20%, elevate my guest experience, no problem, and the guest is going to love me. In a quick serve, it's a little harder to do. We don't have as much opportunity to make the guest experience evident and pay off in spades for the price increase.
Perfect. Thank you. Next up, how can restaurants manage negative feedback to price increases from guests?
I would say, you know what, honestly, I would really say if you have done the approach we talked about, margin menu pricing and being smart about your price increases, I would honestly say you will have zero negative feedback. We're seeing price increases in every industry across the board. And to me, a 12, 14, 16% price increase in restaurants that got beat up during COVID, and everyone knows that, and dealing with inflationary pressures, I will be shocked if you have any pushback at all. I think if you're putting your prices up 40% and going about it the wrong way, you're going to have pushback, and I don't have a great answer for you. I guess if you do have consumers that are concerned with price increases, I think that it's an honest discussion. If your server comes up and says, oh, well, my table is concerned about the price increases, as an owner manager, you have a discussion with them and say, listen, this is what needs to happen. Our labor costs have gone up, our pricing has gone up. You've heard in the media the inflation that's going on. I need to put my prices up, but I've done it responsibly. It's not a large increase, and unfortunately, it's what I need to do to stay in business. I hope you can support me. And you know what? I appreciate you discussing this with me. Can I buy you dessert tonight? It's on me.
Love that. I think a free dessert goes a long way. Number 3 here, we've got, how do you measure food costs and margin pricing for accountability with the chef if it's not a percentage of food cost?
Oh, great question. Love that. So we've got a great menu engineering webinar on our website, and I would encourage you go check that out. It's a 40-minute webinar all about menu engineering. But when you're maximizing the profitability, you focus entirely on profit margin. So when we're engineering a menu with our clients and maximizing the profitability, you will never hear me talk about percent food cost. Once we've set the price of our menu, we've got it all costed, and we have our point of sale mix of sales, then we talk about percent food cost. So when I engineer my menu and I maximize the profitability, I set my pricing and I factor in my mix of sales, that whole calculation, which, like I said, the Navi software that I mentioned in here will do it all for you, but that calculation will tell you what your food cost percent should be based on your sales price, based on your recipe costings, and based on your mix of sales from your POS. So once you've done all that, maximize the profitability, it'll tell you your food cost should be 34.6% or 28.7%. And yes, that number is then what you hold your chef accountable to when you do inventory control and you're managing your product costs and your P&Ls. So food cost percent, liquor cost percent, those percentages are still incredibly important to control your product costs, but not important when you're maximizing your menu strategy and pricing to maximize your menu profitability. Hopefully that makes sense, but if you want to find out more, go to our, I think it's on our website. We have a bunch of our webinars, and one is all about menu engineering.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on tipping fatigue? It seems that non-food service businesses are asking for tips for their POS, and it's been seen negatively affecting the food service perception.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a negative thing out there. Here's what I would say, and what, and again, I would say my consultants are my team of consultants that are in working with restaurants at the ground level may have a better answer for this than me. So this is just, my perception, which is, I think that the tipping fatigue is largely not restaurant focused. People are really fatigued with non-service based industries that seem to be now tipping exorbitantly. I would say that most people are still more than happy to tip fairly to restaurants. And I think I would suggest that you treat your guests fairly and not try to gouge them the same way I'm suggesting don't gouge on menu pricing. So me going to a restaurant, if I'm given the choice to tip and I can tip, I will tip fairly. And like we said by that stat, I will probably tip a higher percent than I used to 4 years ago. If I go to a restaurant and I get a prompt that defaults me to 25%, And then I have to scramble to try and find how I don't tip 25%, and my other options 22%, and then I have to pick other amount. Then that definitely would frustrate me as a consumer because I feel like I'm getting gouged. So my perception is that people understand the restaurant industry. It's a service business. They know we've gone through rough times. They're prepared to tip service staff fairly, but no one likes to be gouged. So I would say treat them fairly, let them tip what they want, and it will probably come through okay.
Thank you. The next question may ask for some clarification here, but the question is, do you feel reducing hours gives guests confidence in them coming in other periods? I may be misinterpreting this, but I'm thinking that we're asking if hours are reduced, does that impact confidence for guests? But if anyone wants to jump in or clarify, I can certainly read that out.
Sorry, can you read again? What was there exactly?
Sure. Do you feel reducing hours gives guests confidence in them coming in throughout other periods?
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, I don't think it overly matters. Yeah, I don't think it overly matters, depending what the meal periods are, right? I mean, if you end up opening only Friday and Saturday nights, because that's the only time you're profitable, that might be challenging. If a guest comes Tuesday night, you're closed, Wednesday night, you're closed, Thursday night, you're closed. We've worked with restaurants that used to be open Monday to Sunday, and we got them to close Monday and Sunday because they really weren't profitable those days, and it was a challenging thing to execute. So they were only open Tuesday to Saturday, and we actually found that by closing Monday to Sunday, it boosted their sales because the people who were coming Monday to Sunday really wanted to come to the restaurant. And once they were closed Monday, they now decided to come Tuesday or Wednesday instead. Yeah, I don't think, you know what, like, I've been in this business long enough. Whenever you're open, if you crush it, if you deliver an outstanding experience, and there are so few restaurants that do this, but if you think back to the last restaurant experience where it was an 11 out of 10, and you left going, oh my gosh, that was so outstanding, what great value proposition. You're telling everyone, and you're coming back, and you don't overly care when they're open or closed. You're coming back whenever you can. So, you know, if you can close Monday to Friday lunch as an example, and then crush it on the evening meal periods, you're going to have absolutely zero concerns.
Next question, how does third-party ordering impact profitability given the 20% plus that they may take off the top?
It definitely impacts profitability, but it is still incremental sales. As long as it's incremental sales. But going back to that model that I had where, you know, 50% of incremental sales goes to the bottom line, with these online ordering platforms now, they're taking another, whatever, 28, 30%. So now we're down to 20% profit on those incremental sales, but it is still more profit. So two things we always talk about with online ordering platforms. One is they do add incremental profit. Two is we don't mind you at all putting higher pricing on those to help compensate for those high commission fees. So I'm 100% okay with your pricing on an Uber or whatever it is to be a higher price point than what it is in your restaurant to help you compensate for that commission. But what we see a number of restaurants doing, and we're 100% behind this as well, is don't feel you need to do those third-party delivery apps if it's compromising your delivery in your own operation, not your delivery, but your execution in your own operation. So if managing that business is detracting from your staff, your team's ability to deliver 11 out of 10 guest experience in the restaurant, then don't do it. Because your main profitability center is in your restaurant. And we're seeing more and more restaurants do that these days where they're not available for online delivery, or they're not available, or some restaurants we're seeing aren't even doing those third-party apps because they're crushing it in the restaurant. They're busy enough in the restaurant. So why, again, spend my effort and focus on something that's compromising my ability to execute in the restaurant when I'm A-okay and my profitability model for my restaurant works perfectly fine without it. So yes, definitely still delivers profitability to your operation. Still do it if it makes sense, as long as it's not compromising your existing internal operation.
Makes sense. This one, we are located in a small farming town. We've done everything in our ability to improve profitability, new chef, new menu, etc. How do you deal with customer backlash when change occurs? Our menu is great. Our profits are up slightly. However, because we're in the summer season, our brewery is getting more tourist traffic. What's the approach to get our locals back for the down season?
Wow, that's a great question. Call us and we'll work with you on it. No, off the top of my head, I would say one of the things that we see in restaurants that harms their business, especially with locals, good guests, and what have you, is lack of communication. So I think openness, transparency about what you're doing and engaging your guests and communicating with them is important. I think to some degree, there's a huge opportunity to embrace local community. We worked with one client, this going back a ways, but they, I think, had a similar situation to what you're talking about. And what they did was they made a model that worked for their tourist market. They made a model that made sense of all that. But they had a discount that was based on your local driver's license. So I forget what it was, but I think they offered 20% off all product for anyone that had a local, like that was from the local community. And that was their way of kind of pricing appropriately, having a profit model that worked in their unique environment, but still was engaged and rewarding to the locals and made the locals feel embraced and welcomed by their environment. So I don't know if that would apply as well. Certainly happy if you do want to call us and discuss with us. We're always happy to chat. Because every situation is different, definitely unique. But yeah, off the top of my head, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. What are your thoughts on AI in the restaurant industry today?
It's coming in hot. It's definitely coming in hot. Honestly, I would probably be the wrong person to talk to about it because of my age. No, I'm just kidding. That's my second age joke of the webinar. Listen, it's coming in hot. It's, I think, an important piece of the puzzle. I don't, or will be. I think we got to be aware of it. I don't think it's there yet. I don't think I'd have a comfort level where I could talk to what is it called, chat, whatever, where I could say to them, hey, create for me a great Italian menu for my restaurant and rely on what it's doing to actually factor in all the different factors that play into a restaurant. You know, I can see AI making the mistake that so many restaurateurs make, which is they get into the restaurant industry because they think it's easy and think, I can cook or I can prepare a menu and I know about hospitality. I have people to my house all the time. Therefore, I can open a restaurant. The restaurant industry has to be the most complicated business that I know of because there are so many different factors that play into the decision-making process. You know, even just menu engineering, things like I'm 100% okay having chicken wings at a losing price point on a menu because of my analysis is telling me that people drink more draft beer when they buy chicken wings, and I'm okay having a shrimp cocktail at a loss on my menu from menu engineering perspective because our kitchen line right now is really slammed at dinner. So that's a dish I can get out really quickly and doesn't require a lot of prep time. And anyway, so many different factors that I'd be really skeptical that AI can help with. That being said, it's, you know, it's only going to get bigger, better, and stronger. Where we're going to be with it in 10 years, I'm not sure. And can it help you with certain other aspects? We see AI playing a part in HR roles and in how it's played into documentation of things, policy and procedure manuals, those kinds of things. Anyway, I don't think it can be ignored, but I don't think we can also ignore the fact that food and beverage, it's a hospitality business, it's a social business, it's an interactive business. We learned hugely during COVID that people want social interaction. We're social beings. So anyway, I think technology, AI, it's all going to have an effect. It's all going to play into it. And probably if it can help us again with product cost, labor cost, and guest experience, then awesome. That's a good thing, but I don't think it's quite there yet, but it will be one day for sure.
Perfect. We'll do one more question and then we'll wrap everything up. The last question we'll go with is, should we wait to increase prices for when minimum wage goes up in October, or is it more reasonable to wait until 2 minimum wage increases take place?
I would do, well, I definitely wouldn't wait for 2. And I also would, we've done menu engineering. We've done menu engineering for 22 years at the 15 group. We go in, we strategically engineer a menu to maximize profitability. And when you do it wisely, you actually check out our webinar if you can, but you actually can maximize profitability by increasing a bunch of prices and decreasing a bunch of prices at the same time. All that to say, we have probably over our 20 years engineered, it's got to be 250, 300 menus. And when we engineer a menu using our margin menu tactics, we increase profitability of a restaurant by about 3% of sales, straight to the bottom line. So for David's Bistro, $2 million in sales restaurant will increase profitability by $60,000 just by menu engineering properly, not by just putting all the prices up. And what I would say is, I think in every single one of those menu engineering sessions, when we are done with it, we have never heard of a guest complaining that prices went up, because when you do it wisely, they barely even notice that prices went up. So I would say definitely don't wait 2 labor increases. I would say you should be menu engineering all the time. Not like every month, but you should be re-engineering your menu at least every 6 months, if not every 3 months, and tweaking your pricing, tweaking what's on the menu, tweaking your profitability model constantly. So definitely, if you haven't done it in the last 3 months and you're considering whether you should do it in October, 100% you should do it in October.
Perfect. Thanks, David. So there were a few questions we didn't get to. I would just recommend David's emails listed here if you want to reach out directly. Some of them were a little specific as well, so I think it'd be great to get in touch with David. But to wrap things up, we really appreciate everyone's time. I know we're at 2:00 Eastern right now. So David, thank you so much. We love working with you as our partner. You're the best in the business. We really love putting some resources out there for anyone that's interested in doing this and listening to some of the insights that David brings from his experience in the restaurant industry. All of the attendees today will receive a follow-up email with the recording, as well as a link with the promo code for David's book. So please feel free to grab those and share with your teams at your restaurants. And you can also reach out to us at Push Operations through our website, or as a response to the email as well. There'll be a link in there. So definitely let us know what you have to follow up. But David, thank you so much. If you have any closing remarks, I'll pass it to you.
No, we love working with Push. We hope, like I said, I hope you find these webinars informative. We love talking restaurants and helping restaurants succeed. We love this industry. That's why we're in it. So anyway, thank you. Yeah, would love if anyone wants to reach out directly, please do.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.